to really communicate with anyone, it takes a while.
Yeah.
And it can't be rushed. And you've got there when you're past all the kind of normal responses.
Yeah.
And there's something just so raw and open in both parties. Both parties feel secure, totally confident that the other has their best interest, completely focused on just to serve the good of the other as other.
Right.
And it doesn't really happen a lot that either me or another person is sort of open to a conversation. I mean,
Right.
A lot of what we talk about is so pro forma. It's the stuff you normally do say or should say, and hey, how's the weather today? And
Right.
to get past all those pro forma levels, and even to get past them, especially with people who have unusual experiences like HLHS, to really now people that have those conditions, like heart conditions, you're a little closer to it because once someone realizes you've got that, then something happens inside of them. They sort of let down maybe their normal defenses.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see you as much of a threat, maybe.
Yeah.
And as I'm talking about this right now, I'm thinking, I'm not sure I've quite realized it. Somehow, but this moment allowed that realization to happen. That once they know that you have this problem, there's a dynamic change. And so you maybe you shift into a zone where the conversation is more honest and things are more vulnerable, and people are sort of more willing to risk getting to that level of honesty with you. So it's almost like a unique opportunity
Right.
that you have. Have you ever felt that before?
I understand where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's an interesting way to put it. I haven't really, because what I try to do is I try not to view myself as
Right.
different.
Right.
But the inevitable is, I am. And things are going to be different. And, I've talked about how in the friend groups and stuff, how that is, it's like that. And I don't know if it stems from the heart condition or something like that, but
It's also your temperament to be open and positive. And
right.
It sort of disarms people as well. But
Yeah.
people are always trying to protect their self-image.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's Pascal said that all of life is a mad pursuit of our self-esteem.
Yeah.
So true. We're so easily kind of wounded or put off or frustrated or challenged.
Yeah.
And people like our audience, they're unique in that they're sort of forced to live on a little deeper level.
Right.
Sort of always see kind of through and into the vulnerabilities, I guess, are more. They've been forced to talk about them and address them. They haven't been able to keep them hidden,
right,
as much as a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And our self-concepts and our egos are so wounded so quickly, and so they're so sensitive.
Yeah.
That sometimes it's almost hard to have a conversation because you keep sensing that woundedness from another person or defensiveness, and you're just not going to get there quickly.
Mm-mm.
So true conversation happens once you're kind of through all those levels, and you know that I'm never challenging your self-concept or your ego, that I'm always looking to build it.
Right.
Even though maybe there's some things you need to say to get there, you're so convinced of it, and I'm so convinced of it.
Right. Yeah.
But how many times, I mean, the conversations that get there, we kind of normally tend to remember them. Remember that night 2 years ago when we were by the fire, and it has the power to change our lives.
Exactly. I think the heart community especially, and when you talk about the vulnerability and how normal people can hide it a little bit better. The heart community kind of wears it on the outside of their chest.
Yeah.
It's already out there.
Yeah, it's visible even.
It's visible, and it's almost easier to get at because, it is easier to get at because it's right there.
Yeah.
You're not hiding your scars because they're there and they're open for everyone to be able to see. Yeah.
That's probably in another episode we talked about how the families come together.
Yeah.
And that's part of that, just sort of that vulnerability that everyone sort of has to embrace then and with each other. And they've been through such difficult moments together, all the hospital operations and pre-op, post-op recovery. These are all deep people. Mm-hmm. No one's allowed to stay on the surface for too long. So there's that. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because when we talk about the third question, or the questions about God and religion and faith, all the normal ways you might normally do that are a bit altered. Like lots of times when people talk about faith and religion, it's a bit argumentative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And are you ready for it to be argumentative?
Yeah. Like
you as a 20-year-old, when you maybe mention that you have some questions to some of your friends, and sometimes the responses are not maybe as open as what you would like, but almost like defensive.
Yeah.
Their concepts are threatened a bit, like they maybe have certain beliefs and things that they're building on, and then when you question them, then their self-concept is a little bit disrupted. Right. And so you've experienced that, right?
Absolutely. So how in every religious conversation turns into an argument almost immediately. And it's, but the way that, we're trying to do it here is we're trying to bring it into as a conversation and as from the perspective of these other, of how people view God and these other religions view God. And I wanted to ask it on here is, you were apostolic first, right?
Yeah, that was sort of like Mennonite.
Right. And then you are now Catholic.
Yeah.
So how in the world does an apostolic become Catholic? Because that in the apostolic church is frowned upon, right?
Oh, yeah. I was raised anti-Catholic.
Right. So how in the world does that come around to be Catholic?
Well, it's kind of a 20-year story.
Right.
That's but you're right. I mean, there's very much a story behind that. And I think that because of my experience and sort of being in a community that was uncomfortable with my questions.
Yeah.
I mean, early on, I sensed that there was, I think I've told you before that my grandmother, who was German, when I would ask questions about faith and religion and about the particular church we were going to, she used to say to me, "Graben Sie nicht so tief," which is German for "don't dig so deep."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it was the culture. It was kind of an anti-academic culture. Questions just weren't encouraged. They thought of it as sort of a weakness of faith.
Wow.
To have questions. And so it made me feel pretty alienated.
Right, yeah.
Growing up because I was tending towards those things, not out of any ill will or bad attitude.
Right.
Just those were the questions that came to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, putting that together with then also your experiences, that's why I'm sort of so hesitant sometimes, because I know that you have to really meet and really go deep to find that place where, instead of argument, then it truly is just engaging the question and meeting it, so that just true communication can happen.
Right.
The journey to Catholicism, the door that opens that is that you have some question that's not being satisfied.
Right.
And then you start to look for, well, who has an answer to this? Or sometimes you just get frustrated and back away.
Right.
That's what happened for me. Like in my 30s, I just didn't see that really any of the churches had answers to my questions about the nature of God, the nature of consciousness, existence, the place that Scripture text plays in religion. And I was drifting towards sort of an evolutionist view of things. I was always naturally given to the physical sciences and physics and sort of the beauty of those things and the stars and the universe and the cosmos. And I just wasn't finding engagement with it. I was finding that pushback from it all. And so I just sort of disconnected. Now I really liked the principles that the conservative churches I'd been going to gave to me, the responsibility and duty and focus on virtues and values and honesty and goodness and truth. And I mean, I really liked that. I really liked the life we were leading. I mean, my aunts and uncles, these people were so trustworthy. And I loved that. I didn't want to change any of that. But it was all the mental component. But I could still go to church and I could still participate. And no one knew it. What I was really thinking or feeling. I just kept that to myself. And that went on for a long time, maybe 15 years. Of just being sort of disenfranchised. And yet still participating. No one even noticing, because my life stayed the same. My conduct and behavior stayed the same. I wasn't out doing wild and crazy things. No one even noticed there was a difference. But I was just so dissatisfied. Like St. Augustine talked about, our souls are restless until they rest in God. And I was just so restless and dissatisfied. And just doing quiet reading in the evenings and finding it. And I mean, the very last place I would have looked was the Catholic Church. I'd been raised anti-Catholic. I mean, why would I want to be encumbered? I had enough questions. Why would I want to be encumbered with all kinds of rituals and ideas that were just, contrivances? And why would I want to burden myself with those types of additional pains? No, I had no idea that they had any answer at all in anything, because I, like most people raised anti-Catholic, you kind of know some arguments about the saints and the Pope and the priestly robes and the dresses and the sex scandals, and it just goes on in the church services, and are somewhat in Latin, and so they don't make sense. I mean, everyone sort of has their own anti-Catholic view. There's always there's thousands of arguments against the Catholic Church. Bishop Sheen one time said, there's 1,000 arguments people have against what they think is the Catholic Church. But much fewer about what the Catholic Church actually is. And I think as I began someone gave me a book about what the Catholics really believe, or it was actually called Evangelical Born Again Catholic. And David Curry, whose parents both taught at Moody Bible, and he was just thoroughly steeped in evangelical Protestantism. And they gave me a book by him, and it was about what the church actually believed. And I remember the first few chapters, I was just astounded. I just no idea. That was the theological and the philosophical background behind the church. And then one thing in particular where, I'm not sure it was him or someone else said that, the Catholic Church is the only thing that has thought about thinking for 2,000 years. Now that pulled me in. And I also knew that the church had an observatory. They have 2 world-class telescopes, one out in Arizona, the other one in Rome. And so it's just, I knew there was something different about the way they got to where they ended up. And so that started me then. I mean, about 20 years ago now, and this just reading everything I could get a hold of about the Catholic Church, and especially G.K. Chesterton. The Catholic convert from 1925 or so, the things he wrote. Because one thing that opened me is that I had started to read C.S. Lewis, because I knew that, I mean, he's kind of an evangelical hero of the faith. And so I'd read Mere Christianity and The Great Divorce, and Surprised by Joy, and a lot of his other books, Chronicles of Narnia, and his fiction work. So I'd read him, and I just thought, and I knew he was a convert from atheism to the Anglican Church, and I thought, who were his influences? And then there was this guy named, which he credited G.K. Chesterton as his biggest influence. I thought, well, I'm going to go right to that guy. And so I started reading Chesterton, Everlasting Man, Orthodoxy, Heresy. I just, my world was just changing from the reading I was doing of Chesterton. Chesterton is like a storm that rolls over you, or a tsunami that nothing's ever the same again. It just rolls over your old ways of thinking. And yeah, Chesterton was an absolute tsunami in my life. And then the things he was saying, because then he converted from secularism and atheism to the Anglican Church, and then from the Anglican Church to the Catholic Church, just when he was, I think, 42. And so he'd seen so many of the arguments and made so many of the arguments himself. And then what he was saying, using the phrase "open your eyes," is often used. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like I was able to live because of Chesterton, and then I followed him to other books, and eventually started going to Catholic churches once in a while and just being open to what they really thought about things. So yeah, there's the answer to your question.
That's awesome.